And in fact, you are judging, you have assumed God's position. And oh my gosh, that's serious. I actually had 2 abortions with this man, and it was crazy. He was Catholic, and I can't even explain. My mother-in-law said, number 2, if you marry her, you might as well shoot me. I think we had sex at the end once a year, like on his birthday or something crazy like that. And my husband, number 2, had already had his next wife lined up, and I knew who it was right away. But the kids told me, by the way. My son said, "Oh, we met daddy's girlfriend today at lunch. She has orange hair." That's how I found out for my child. We started going down the tubes financially, lost 3 houses, I had 2 rentals, and lost the house we were in. We had to file bankruptcy, and I believe I truly had a nervous breakdown. Hello, it's Robin. Thank you for being here and watching my crazy show today. I'm doing the best I can with bringing you the subject matter, and it seems like it might be a long broadcast, but we'll see. I may have to split it into 2 parts. Anyway, we're going to talk about judging and what judging can reap in your life. And I have some live examples, and going to talk about it through relationships and marriages and things. So I wanted to first read you a scripture that I'm using for judging, and the one that is in Matthew 7:1. Judge not, that you will not be judged. For what with what you judge, you will for what judgment you judge, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. But why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look, a plank is in your eye, you hypocrite? First remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. So that's one of the scriptures about judgment. There's others too, but it's a very powerful dynamic. So how do you know if you're making a judgment? Okay, so judging is not looking at someone and saying, he's fat, she's short, her hair really needs help. No, it's not that. Judging is not observing. Judging usually carries with it a negative connotation, and it conveys that the one who is judging has the power and authority to condemn and try, like in a court. And in fact, you are judging, you have assumed God's position. And oh my gosh, that's serious. And have found that the person is guilty of not measuring up to your standards. And it's usually accompanied by an air of superiority. So, in other words, check your heart and ask yourself these questions. Is that person inferior to me because fill in the blank? Am I better than them because do I think less of them because they are fill in the blank? So the root word about judging is properly to distinguish. It's called krino. Properly to distinguish, that is, decide mentally or judicially, by implication, to try, condemn, punish, avenge, conclude, condemn, damn, decree, determine, esteem, judge, go to the law, ordain, call in question, sentence, to think. Also, you would avenge, condemn, condemnation, damnation, and judgment. So that's a little bit more about what happens when you judge. You're putting yourself in the place of God. So I'm going to give a little example. So God has laws in the universe to keep order and not have chaos. So here's an example. If you take this marker and drop it, the law of gravity brings it down. So there's spiritual laws too. So when you judge somebody, you're going to reap the judgment back on you in some way. Usually it happens with you get in the same situation and you start reaping what you've judged. And I'm going to give you real live examples of my life, of course. through the relationships I had. So, for example, my dad treated me mentally cruel and he was abusive verbally. He didn't hit me or anything, but he would call me stupid and we weren't allowed to laugh. It was just a very strict, just controlling atmosphere because he was a narcissist. And I think my mom was probably codependent. So here we got that dynamic going on. So I'm going to talk about my marriages today. Try to condense it, but there's just so much. I could probably go on for 3 hours just with circumstances to do with my 5 marriages. And I live with a couple of guys. So you call, the woman at the well, but she evangelized the whole town. So, I can claim that, the real and raw. And I have to think about I was going to start with my first marriage, but my first true relationship was when I lived with a guy when I was 16. He was like the epitome. He was the same as my dad to me. He was real controlling. He was mentally cruel and then did stuff to stay out all night, not tell me where he was, that kind of stuff. So that may be a little bit of reaping. But what I was going to say also is that you reap, and as the years go by and the judgment is not repented of, because I'm going to give you a prayer to repent of judgments that you may have made, but the repercussions are like it grows like a snowball, when you roll a little ball and it gets bigger and bigger. So over the years, the judgments show up even stronger in your life. You reap it in different ways. I'm going to cover my marriages, but I didn't really reap it as much until third or fourth marriage and the fifth. The fourth was the worst. And see, I was in my 40s then. So that one, I was surely reaping. Okay, so the first marriage, I was 21 and I met him in a bar and partying, of course. I guess I was the party girl, party animal. So we met and supposedly fell in love really quick and moved in together after 2 weeks and then got married after 3 months. I had a Catholic wedding and he was a farmer from Pennsylvania. He did have a good job doing road work around Atlanta, if you could imagine that. He stayed pretty busy. So anyway, the first marriage, he ended up being an alcoholic. So I can't say I really reaped judgment, but I didn't even know what an alcoholic was. So when he'd make this big glass of not Jack Daniels, not Jim Beam. My grandmother drank Jim Beam. So he'd make his ginger ale and Jack Daniels and be drinking on that all day. And I thought it was that was his way of relaxing because he did work 6 days a week hard and he started getting DUIs that got really bad. Then there was some drugs he started messing with. And that's when I said, no, I said, you're going to cause us to lose our house with all these, DUIs. And back then you could pay your way out of a DUI. That was Kennesaw way back. That was probably 76, I think. And yeah, I've got a little bit of congestion today, being real and raw. I'm not a professional, that's for sure. And some days it takes a lot to do this, a lot of energy. So I'm doing the best I can at my age, right? But I'm still here, alive and kicking and taking names like the devil. So anyway, that marriage lasted 4.5 years and it was a joke of a marriage because he was cheating on me and I was messing around somewhat. I don't know if I physically had an affair or not, but I know I was out because he was working so much and then he started having an affair. So he's even busier. And he told me and showed me a picture of the girl. And I said, I want to meet her. It was a joke of a marriage, but I think he did really love me. I actually had 2 abortions with this man and it was crazy. He was Catholic and I can't even explain. I guess that might be another show. I don't know. I just didn't think I needed a child in my life. And the second one, okay, I did have an affair. The second one was from the affair. So I'll have to cover that in another episode because I'm just laying out that I had a lot of woundings, a lot of trauma ongoing, and I'm not glorifying anything like the devil did because it's all demonic. But again, I wasn't saved. I didn't know Jesus. Believed in God and I'd pray once in a while, mainly prayers at night, right? When you go to bed, that's about all we prayed in my family. All right. So before I even got divorced from the paper wasn't even dry, I met another guy at work, and that was number 2. I'll just call him number 1, number 2. What So I met the guy at work, number 2, and actually he seemed to be a pretty stable guy, hard worker, had been at a company for a while. And we just started hanging out, hit it off somewhat. And of course, we're out having drinks, and that's when happy hour was popular. So I got with him, like I said, before the paper was even dried. He helped me move out of number 1's house. So that's how close we were, and went to an apartment. And we hung out, I guess, about 9 months. He courted me some. We got in a fight and broke up because I was definitely Northern and he was Southern. And his parents were very Southern Baptist. They called me a Episcopalian, like Episcopalian, Episcopalian. And they said, I was in Fort Lauderdale before, and they said, oh, Fort Lickerdale. And because I was divorced, that was a black mark against me. My mother-in-law said, number 2, if you marry her, you might as well shoot me. So this was a real nice atmosphere I was marrying into. And the apron strings didn't get cut for quite a while because he was still living at home. He was younger than me. The marriage went on. We were really good friends. I was happy. But I had to leave the job because 2 of us couldn't work at the same company and be married. So I decided to leave because I could get a job easier. I get a new job and immediately get promoted to accounting manager. And I was 26. So I was the only woman manager in that company. So I had to performance driven, perfectionist, all this stuff from the way I was raised. So I had to prove something. So I was working and working probably 6 days a week, and we're hanging out with his friends, having fun. But me being gone all the time, when the cat's away, the mice will play, and he did find someone to play with. So probably, I don't know if it was 3 years into the marriage, I picked up on what was going on. I am prophetic. So I accused him of having an affair, and he admitted it, but he said he wanted to divorce me. He wasn't happy. I just was like, no, I don't want a divorce. I just didn't want that going on. And I guess I loved him. I thought I did at least. And even his mother was like, you're not getting divorced. So I had her on my side, even though she blamed me for the affair because I didn't take care of him well enough. So I drove him to have an affair. I couldn't win with that lady. Anyway, but yeah, and then I judged Southern Baptist ladies. Oh, I did. Now I think of that. And I kept reaping those for a while. Yeah, judgments can come in all shapes and sizes. So also my number 2 said one of the reasons he wasn't happy because he wanted a family. And I had told him specifically, don't marry me if you want children. Behind that was to do with my childhood and etc. So when he said that, I said, I guess I could be open to having a family because I was 30. And so it was 4 years into the marriage. So I was going, this party life's fun, but it's empty. I had this hole inside of me that I wanted to fill, and God was the only one that could fill it, but I didn't know that. I immediately get pregnant. Also, my mother had to say something. I think every woman should experience childbirth and having a child. And she kind of almost was mocking it. And I thought, yeah, I guess I want to have a child. But bam, I get pregnant right away. Then it was like being on cloud 9. We were all happy and expecting. It was exciting. So I was still working till the end. And I delivered a beautiful baby girl that I'm so proud of. And I wanted a girl so bad. I almost stood up in my stirrups for the delivery process, the stirrups. So I told my daughter that every birthday. I said, I almost stood up in my stirrups when I learned you were a girl because I didn't want to know the sex ahead of time. I said that'd be like opening your Christmas presents before Christmas. So I made sure that it was a surprise totally. So we went on for a while having a child, and I was still working I always had good positions. And number two was great at taking care of my daughter, giving her a bath. And he was very considerate. And we were like kind of good friends in a way, but he definitely was stepping out on me, I found out later. So that went on for what, 2 or 3 years, and but still was not right because I was also going out partying with the auditors from work and I got attached to one. I didn't have an affair. As the Bible says, if you think of somebody with lust in your heart, you've committed adultery. So I did spiritually commit adultery. We went away. We were still trying to hold the marriage together, and we would go away for romantic weekends once in a while, especially when you have a child. So we went to the Peachtree Plaza for the weekend. We didn't have much of a sex life. I think we had sex at the end once a year, like on his birthday or something crazy like that. And this all stems from what I went through as a young child, which I will cover in future episodes. So, as far as birth control, I didn't use any because there really wasn't a big need. So, when we went away, it was right after my menstrual period, and I shouldn't have gotten pregnant because I could tell when I was ovulating, I could feel it. I shouldn't get pregnant physically. I did get pregnant. And that's when a lot of trauma happened there with that pregnancy because my number two said, I was on the verge of asking you for a divorce. So I thought, wow, I don't want to have two children, and try to raise them by myself, being divorced, and I'm working a high powered job and on. So I actually thought of aborting my son. The devil was after him from the beginning to get him not to be born. My son does have a huge calling on his life, by the way. So, not just because he's my son. So, that was going on. And it was such that number two thought that the baby was not his because I was going out so much. He was having his thing. And he said that he didn't think the baby was his. And I knew it was because I had not been unfaithful. So I had a lot of trauma over that pregnancy. It was not an easy pregnancy at all. I didn't even gain much weight. I flew out to California to do some projects, and it was hard. It was all that tension with my husband at the time. When my child was born, my son had the exact same cowlick in the back of his head, which was a big one that my husband had. So he was like a little clone of him. So I didn't say a word. I just was like, man, okay, so you have to see this. And I know God did that for me. So that was cool. After having that child, I did something stupid and thought that I should quit and stay at home with the kids. And I was doing multi-level marketing, thinking it was going to pay the bills, but no, because I was more the breadwinner in the family and staying home was a mistake for me. I'm career oriented, and because of my background, I wasn't very maternal. We started going down the tubes financially, lost 3 houses. I had 2 rentals and lost the house we were in. We had to file bankruptcy. And I believe I truly had a nervous breakdown at that time because I wanted to drive the car off the bridge and go into Lake Altoona. I was crying all the time. I was so stressed with the kids. My temper was not good. And I remember my good old mom saying, boy, you sound stressed. You should have joint custody and give the kids to your ex and all this. I had to get another job, and it was downtown Atlanta. So it was quite a commute from North Ackworth. And then my son, because of probably his spirit, knew he wasn't wanted. So he had a lot of infections. He had a staph infection when he was born from the hospital. He kept getting ear infections. He was in Scottish Rite at one point, and I just could not deal with a job. I was assistant controller for Aramark, which is part of Aerotech. Yeah, Aramark. And I was with the uniform division downtown. So I just was like, I can't deal with the stress of going to the doctor all the time. And my husband, number two, had already had his next wife lined up. And I knew who it was right away. But the kids told me, by the way. My son said, "Oh, we met daddy's girlfriend today at lunch. She has orange hair." That's how I found out for my child, and it was not even hidden, and we weren't even out of the same house when that happened, so that was pretty distressing to me. But yeah, I'm sure, and when I look at all the signs and hear about nervous breakdowns, I'm sure I had one at the time, but I picked myself up by the bootstraps and got this job downtown, assistant controller. And of course, there's a lot of men there I could go out with and party with. So, I mean, this just shows you that God can take a messed up life. And I'm not even done telling you parts of it. So, that marriage ended, and I moved into an apartment by myself, and I was terrified to be alone. That was one reason I think that I had to have a man with me, because I was fearful that someone was going to come and break in and kill me, and again, that's from some past traumas that I had. All right, so let's see. Number three was not a husband, it was a live in. I lived with the man for probably a year or so because I met him at my work. He came as a project manager from Iowa. He asked me for a drink, and I thought, what's the harm? He doesn't live here. He was married too. The thing snowballed into he got divorced, bought us a house, a nice house, and we lived together because he was married for a long time, and then things started going downhill pretty quick. He probably was a narcissist, but more like a covert narcissist, because once I moved in with him, he totally changed, and I wasn't happy with the change. So here I'm like, oh my gosh, at least I didn't marry him, and I got to get out of this somehow. And he did help me buy a house in my name, so we did split up. He did go back to Iowa claiming he had two sons and he couldn't be away from his sons. And I don't blame him, but this is where the therapy started with me, because here, the man, I didn't care for him. He drove me nuts. I wanted him out. But when I thought about him leaving, I got suicidal. And I'm thinking, why am I suicidal? I don't want the man in my life. So that started me on my healing journey. I was probably 36, 37. So I went to a psychologist to find out why was I suicidal. And I spent a year in therapy, and I never did get an answer, but I was hypnotized, and that was weird because I know I was going into the spirit realm, and I was seeking this whole time. Deep down, had wanted to find God. So anyway, that started the therapy, and all I got out of the therapist was he thought I was molested. When I looked at the ink blot test, all I saw was blood and animals and just some really creepy things. And again, that's another episode. All right, so that was two and a half. Now three, let's see, how did I meet three? Oh yeah, this may have to be two episodes because it's going on for a while here. So I decided that all of a sudden one day, and I think it was God moving on me, I was going to go out to have a drink with my girlfriend, and I just went, man, this life is so empty. I guess I had a hole in me that I couldn't fill. And I was like, man, I'm just tired of this life. So I just thought, I'm going to quit drinking and try to change my life. So I called AA up, and the guys, yeah, come do 90 meetings in 90 days. And if you don't like it, we'll refund your misery. And I was like, I think that's what he said. So I started going to AA. I was in there for a year, and I quit drinking totally. And what happened when that happened, it's like I can't just tell you about the marriages because there's so much other stuff in between. So when I quit drinking, to me, it's just fascinating because I like to study all this stuff. Why does this happen? I became very depressed. They said they diagnosed me with severe depression. And I had another job that wasn't in downtown. I was an accounting manager at a Fortune 500 company. And all of a sudden, I'm like, I can't pick up my pencil. I'm so depressed. So apparently, I had been self medicating and through the drinking. I needed medication, apparently. I did go to a psychiatrist because I couldn't function. I had to go to several. And one guy finally said, "You need to go. I'm going to put you on Prozac. That's going to help you get out of your depression." I didn't want to go on that, even though I took recreational drugs in the past, but I just didn't want to take Prozac. But I ended up taking it. And honestly, I was on it probably off and on towards the end, probably a total of 15 years. When I got on the Prozac, I felt what I said normal in a way. I had confidence, I had some self esteem, and all that happened. So I was still working, and I think I had a little midlife crisis. I wanted to get out of corporate America. So I decided to open a coffee house in Marietta. And I met a guy at AA that was one of the supposed leaders and immediately just liked him, thought he was arrogant, whatever. His ex-wife was my best friend at the time. And she said, he needs a job. He could manage your coffee house for you. So I thought he looked like Paul Newman. And I thought, I guess I could try. And then I could keep my job to fund the coffee house expenses. But I got the thing open. That's how I do when I feel like I'm supposed to do something. Now I could say I can do all things in Christ who strengthens me. But I just kept going, and I thought until I hit a wall, I'm going to keep going. And I got the thing opened. I had to do the paperwork. I was the cook. I was the bookkeeper, everything. And this guy was the manager. But he had just recently got divorced, and he was still splitting up the marital assets. He had a house with a pool. And then he started romancing me. He saw my kids, that they were important to me because I had my kids every other weekend. And he started working on that to get me to fall in love with him or whatever. And I think he was a con artist, narcissist. Now he didn't really treat me mentally. He didn't abuse me mentally or anything, but just he was in it for the money. And I shouldn't have married him, but he presented himself as a Christian too. And I just didn't know enough. He said he started a church and on, but he was not a true Christian. He introduced me to tarot cards. He took me to a New Age conference where they're talking about chakras. And so I was searching and seeking. And in a roundabout way, God did use AA to connect me with some people because there's a lot of believers in AA. So anyway, that marriage did not. I ended up getting married because I didn't want to show my kids that it was okay to live with somebody. So I did it just for that reason, pretty much. The guy fell off the wagon. He became very demonic. And that was a whole other thing. I had owned a house that we lived in. And financially, I decided to do a lease purchase on it and move to a cheaper place and try to get some money out of that house. Because in the meantime, I had quit my job because I was in midlife crisis, I guess. I was sick of corporate America. I didn't want to be a corporate America robot anymore. And the Prozac kind of gave me like a lot of assertiveness, and I did change a little bit. So I don't know if you could say it was good or bad, but at the time I had to come out of the depression to function. Leaving the job, moving to apartment, and guess who was living there and encouraged me to move there so we could get the referral. Number 3, live there. So I move in there. Oh, okay, let me cover the wreck. While I was doing the coffee house, my son's birthday was on the weekend, and I was driving to pick him up and give him a birthday party, and it was raining. So I got in a bad accident that kind of started a lot of my physical problems that I still deal with. I got hit head on in the rain. The other person hydroplaned, hit me in my 90-day-old car, and the airbag came out and hit me in the face and knocked me out for a couple seconds. And then the seatbelt, of course, locked up, and I'll hit my microphone and take it out. So when it locked up, that caused all kinds of neck problems. They thought the airbag had broken my nose. I had burns on my arms from the airbag, the friction. So when I woke up from being out, there was smoke all in the car. And I thought that the car was on fire. I didn't know that airbags had dust in them or whatever. So I start to try to get out of the car thinking it's on fire. And it wasn't. But I couldn't get the door open. And I finally and I'm panicked, man. Talk about trauma. And so the ambulance picked me up and put me on one of those boards. They thought maybe I broke my neck or whatever. So my son had to hear, he was probably like 11 or so, had to hear that his mom was in the hospital hurt and she couldn't come do his birthday party. But that was the start. That accident was the start of a lot of physical problems. I was probably 40 or so, and the doctor said I worked out constantly. He said, if you hadn't been in such good shape, you would have been a lot worse off. I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia. I ignored it, and then I said, what? Fiber what? Spell it. And I started researching, and boy, did I get depressed about that. I thought my life was over with. Stuff grows in your brain if you let it. And again, I wasn't a believer. I didn't have Jesus to help me. I knew God was in my life in some aspect. But that started the pain pill addiction. So I was going to orthopedic. He was older and he believed in giving me lots of Darvocet. So I got into taking the pain pills. I'm like, wow, this feels pretty good. And guess what? I decided I could have a beer or so, and I wasn't an alcoholic, and I really wasn't because I'd seen a true alcoholic. And boy, when they start drinking, they cannot stop until they get sick or pass out and I've seen alcohol poisoning. I was not that type of drinker. I decided to have a beer with my pain pill, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is wonderful because it was numbing all kinds of pain, physical plus emotional. And I had hurt my knee real bad. I had a knee brace. I'm still trying to run the coffee house. I couldn't even have strength to open a Tupperware because it hit my neck, shoulder, all that stuff. So I had to hire someone to help me until I met my best friend. I hired her to work. So yeah, the coffee house really, we had open mic night, but once I had that accident, my heart was not in it anymore. It was just too much with everything. Number three, when you were living in separate apartments, so obviously we were not getting along. So that marriage lasted really, we started having problems pretty quick. But I think it was a year and a half. And my wonderful mother spoke at the wedding. She goes, oh, this will just last a couple years. My mom would curse me constantly. She's not alive now, or I wouldn't be saying that. But yeah, it was just constantly saying, she said in the past, I'm surprised you didn't have a nervous breakdown, or I'm waiting. No, what she said was, I'm waiting for you to have a nervous breakdown. So she spoke it. Your parents, I mean, it did take an effect on me. But number three went off the deep end, drinking, and he decided that he'd turn back like into Satanism. And he'd pull up with a bag of alcohol and say, come, you want to come party with me? And I'm like, no, leave me alone. So I'm minding my business, I thought, at the pool at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, thinking that's a time I wouldn't meet any men. I was tired of men. I wanted a break. I just wanted to try to recuperate after we ended up closing the coffee house, of course. And had my kids every other weekend, and I really got into that. And I had another good job supporting accounting software. So I ended up getting stalked by number three because I met number four at the pool when I was trying to mind my own business. I had a cross on. So he said, are you Christian? And I just said, yes. He was Catholic. So that man, I think God sent him to help me, but I probably wasn't supposed to marry him because he was a good Bible believing Christian, Catholic. And I actually got saved from a tape that he gave me. That's how I got saved, is he gave me a tape teaching, and at the end was a salvation prayer. So I said it at walking around the lake at work. But anyway, the man was on assignment from Texas and was working for Lockheed Martin. And he was a ex B-52 bomber pilot for 20 years in the military. I've learned a little bit about how military can shape people too. But this man was a full-fledged narcissist. So at this point, I was reaping my judgment from saying my dad, because then you start thinking all men are cruel and mentally cruel and things like that. So this guy, he got worse over time, but he ended up leaving Texas and moving to Georgia and bought us a nice house with a pool, and everything seemed great on the outside. We were going to church. I found a spirit-filled church because the Catholic church was just too dry for me. I tried it with him, and he did agree to go to the other church with me. But he also would come home and start cussing like a sailor and being racially judging and things like that. But he was go to church once a week and then act like a heathen the rest of the time. And towards me, threatening to throw my furniture in the cul-de-sac and divorce me. He was always saying mean things. He told me he had the Polish mafia. He's from New Jersey. These stories, these are all true. So he actually lived on the exit that the Sopranos showed in their show, The Sopranos. He lived in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And you could tell he cussed like a sailor. He said they used to throw bricks at him when he'd go to school. It was a really rough place, and he was really rough. So he threatened me that he was going to have the Polish mafia come after me and take care of me. And then I'd get upset, and then he'd comfort me. It was a game to him. So I was pretty much his cook and maid, and we didn't even consummate the marriage that came out at the divorce, that we never consummated the marriage, but I took care of him otherwise. So that marriage lasted about 4 years. I saw signs that he was abusive before I even married him, and I ignored it because I was in fear mode. I was fearful that I didn't make enough money because I had a high rent at my apartment, and I knew this guy had money. So I thought, if I marry him, I'll be set financially. And they always say, marry for money, not love, after I'd been married 3 times already. And I did live with him first. So I got a little bit of taste of how he was, but I ignored it. I ignored all the red flags. And of course, he love bombed me in the beginning, white roses, wine and dine. We went out dancing constantly, having a great time. Again, I was the party girl, and the alcohol made me very social. That was what I was using it for, because I was socially awkward. I was shut down. I was raised that I didn't have anything to say worth listening to. Honest to God, I wouldn't finish a sentence because I thought nobody wanted to hear what I had to say. Hopefully you can hear me just fine now. But yeah, it was interesting. But number 4 was a true narcissist. I was still hurt from the wreck, and because of the abusive nature of my marriage, I had the fibromyalgia diagnosis. I got another disease called interstitial cystitis, and it was an incurable bladder disease that they didn't know what caused it, and there was no cure for it. So I was in a lot of pain. I was having constant pain. And I was going to a gynecologist too. And I was still doing the Darvocets, and I kept asking for refills from the gynecologist because it was pelvic pain. So he thought I had something. He did one operation, I forget the name of it. And I ended up having a full hysterectomy in the end, but it wasn't my uterus at all. Nothing to do with that, because it was my bladder. So when I was out of Darvocet so much, the doctor says, oh, and this was probably 2001, 2002, back when they had the OxyContin push. And I saw a movie about it on Netflix, and it was just disgusting how they manipulated the doctors with the pharmaceutical reps and pushed it and said it's not addictive. That was the most addictive medicine I've ever been on, and it took me 2 years to get off it because I got addicted to it. So with all this going on with my health, and I still had knee and just joint issues, and at one point I counted up like 11 or 12 conditions I had, not all serious, but they had me on 12 medications. So I didn't know if I was coming or going or what. And that's when I found Elijah House and saw the material. I didn't know Jesus even healed. That's how naive I was. I didn't know scripture. I never read a Bible. So I went, wow, Jesus heals? Because this church I went to was a vineyard church and they believed in healing. So I thought, wow, if Jesus heals, I'm going to try to get my healing. And that started my journey, starting with Elijah House. I went to Pleasant Valley, which is Henry Wright, for a week and studied all that for a couple years. But yeah, I was on all these medications. And of course, I thought it's numbing the pain, and I was still drinking. So yeah, I was having a great time floating in the pool on Oxycontin. Oh, they gave me a breakthrough pain thing. They had me on crazy muscle relaxers that they don't give you anymore, Soma. So I was like happy and got fat. I was fat and happy. I got up to 200 pounds because I spoke it. I said, I think I'll get as fat as I can. I was mad at my husband and I did gain a whole bunch of weight. So that was great. I'm telling you, words are powerful. So anyway, that did start the healing journey even more. I kept trying different little counselors here and there, but nobody was giving me any relief for anything. I still could I'll put it in the comments section. I'll put the prayer there because you do have to search your heart and look for what I say is when you see a pattern in your life, if you see like a same thing happening over and over in different people or in your marriage, relationships, that usually is a sign of judgment, that you made a judgment. And where there's fruit, there's a root. And sometimes there are forgotten judgments you may have made as a child. But if there's fruit, I'm telling you, there's a root. So we'll stop here and I will put a prayer for judging, but I'll finish the rest of the story next week to go on to 5. And then there was a 6, but I didn't marry him. So anyway, but the reaping process was in full force with this 4th marriage. And let me pray for you before we end. Father God, I just ask you to bless these people that are listening. And if they have any similar circumstances, I ask that you meet them for their needs and just give them what they need to have a breakthrough in their life. Just break through and give them the desires of their heart. Let them know that you're with them, that you're always there. You'll never leave them or forsake them. And Lord, I just thank you for what you're doing in everyone's life, my life, and hopefully this encourages somebody. And we just praise you and love you, Lord, in Jesus' name. All right, I'll see you next week. Hopefully this was helpful or interesting at least. I thank you so much for listening. If you want to make comments, I'm trying to get suggestions for what you might want to see or what would be helpful. So let me know in the comments if you have anything you'd like to say. All right. Love you all. Bye.